What is up, Metroid fans? Welcome back to the Omega Metroid podcast. The introduction sounds different because it's Dak, not Andy, joined this week again by Doominal. Doominal, how you doing, my man? Thanks for helping out this week as Andy is MIA at the moment.
Yeah, Andy is off being a nerd, getting married or something like that. I don't know, yeah. No, but in all seriousness, no, though, Andy, Sam, congratulations, you two. So happy for the both of you. And Sam in particular, we really appreciate you putting up with our crap on a nearly weekly basis. And so, yeah, very happy for Andy and Sam and their much needed vacation. They're going to be gone for about 2 or 3 more episodes. So you all are just going to have to deal with us in the meantime. So hope you all are ready for that.
Yeah, so I was gone for a little bit, getting settled into, I guess, what's going on in my life. Now, Andy will be gone, as you just said. Yeah, he's in the middle of something that way out prioritizes the show. So he's got a well-deserved break from doing some Metroid talk, but I'm sure that he'll be chomping at the bit to get back to talking about some Metroid stuff. We already have a bunch of other topics planned, and yeah, it'll be the two of us for the next few weeks, it seems. So yeah, we've got some shows lined up, and in fact, a lot of stuff to talk about today. So I want to get into that pretty quickly because we've got quite the list, at least from what myself and Doom have already gotten into. Obviously, we are within 60 days, I believe, of Metroid Dread coming out for the Nintendo Switch, which is super hype, and we're all very excited for that. We'll be covering a lot more Dread in the coming episodes, and then obviously when the game launches, so stay tuned for that. But we're also going to talk a little Dread today, as well as some other stuff. We're going to be talking about the Golden Age or Golden Era of Metroid, which, and myself and Duo might actually go into what exactly denotes the beginning and end of that. But generally, people would consider that, you know, the time in the 2000s, mid-2000s, from when Metroid Prime and Fusion came out in 2002, to, you know, around when like Metroid Prime 3 and Trilogy came out later in that decade. And we'll go deeper into that, but we're going to kind of talk about, you know, what it was like those games coming out, the context of those games coming out at the times they did, and, you know, the influence they had on other releases, different events and memories that we had playing those games and getting them and living through the releases as well. And there's a bunch of games, of course, that came out, and many people think, myself included, that we might be in for another golden age, another golden era, maybe a platinum era of Metroid, as we have Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime 4 on the outset. So lots to talk about there, but we also have some things to talk about beforehand. So let's get into that real quick. By the way, episode 75 of Omega Metroid Podcast, which is pretty hype. So thank you all for listening and sticking with us. It's been quite the journey. Literally, when we started this show, there was no new Metroid on the horizon. Metroid Prime 4 might have still been a myth. Who knows? Like, we knew it was announced, knew it was restarted. Who knows what was happening? And now here we are. Look how far we've come. So thank you all for sticking with us. But yeah, so the first thing we wanted to get into here, and I think it's something that's been pretty hype that people have been talking about. There was a tweet that went out, and I think it was also reported elsewhere by GameStop, saying that their top 5 most pre-ordered games for the Nintendo Switch, number 1, Metroid Dread, over Pokemon twice, it looked like. Both the, well, I guess 3 times.
It was the double pack.
Yeah, yeah, right. So that's actually pretty cool. Both the new Pokemon remakes and the new Pokemon Legends game, as well as the Mario Party Superstars game, and then I believe it's Shin Megami Tensei was the 5th game. So yeah, Metroid Dread. Obviously, we've been talking about the pre-orders. Doominal, did you expect, though, to, like, even this, like, I guess late into the game, but also early in a way, that Metroid Dread's still kind of holding this spot?
I honestly, it wasn't even something I was necessarily thinking about at this point, but yeah, I'll be like Pokemon in particular. Like the other ones, I didn't feel like were super surprising. Even Mario Party, because that's usually the kind of game that, like, I feel like it would sell more than Metroid, but like I don't think it would be pre-ordered more than Metroid. But Pokemon, that one actually really surprised me, because people like Pokemon pre-orders are usually go mad high, but like yeah. The fact, and clearly, like, let's be very clear, Metroid Dread is not going to outsell Pokemon. Not even close. Like,
whoa. Maybe it could. Who knows? Not with that attitude, man.
Hey, listen. It's not going to outsell Pokemon, but let's be very clear. RGT 85 is going to be playing Balan Wonderworld, and I cannot wait for that stream.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just all good news. It's a really good time to be a Metroid fan in general. You know, my whole life at least, maybe you can relate to this on a similar degree. You've always felt like the underdog being a Metroid fan. Like, oh, I have like, and now for the first time, it's like, oh my gosh, other people are finally starting to discover this, and it feels great. It really does.
Well, the thing was, I kind of felt that way of like, Metroid was really good and doing well back in the 2000s, We'll talk about that later. I feel like that's when Metroid was, it's the last decade that really has made me feel how you just described, where like, oh, being a Metroid fan is really, it doesn't really put you at the top of the tier list in terms of feeling great. So yeah, this is awesome though. I actually didn't realize it was the double pack at first. I thought it was just one of the, like, but I mean, I guess it makes sense the double pack would be selling that well. And these days people just want to get as much Pokemon as they can. I'm actually surprised that Legends wasn't higher up, because I really thought that was going to be something that like everybody's going to be jumping onto. It's like Breath of the Wild Pokemon. And I'm really interested to see how that goes. But yeah, the hype for Metroid Dread being at the top of the list, obviously, yeah, Pokemon's going to sell more. It's the bigger franchise. More Pokemon games come out. And, this is like a huge, like, at this moment, it feels like a once in a lifetime, like, Metroid game. It's like, we can't believe that this game's actually coming out. So obviously there's a ton of hype about, around it. But still, I think Metroid doing this well against like the media conglomerate or whatever that is Metro, or that is Pokemon, right? Like, Pokemon is so huge that even like all of that aside, still to see Metroid outdoing it in some way, I think it's a milestone in a way. And yeah, we'll see if that actually continues through the sales. But I thought this was pretty noteworthy. Obviously, a lot of people, everyone else did too. But just there was a lot of hype when the game was originally revealed, and obviously the game was like on the top of the charts and like Amazon, all these other sites for pre-orders, but then it kind of died down a little bit. But then, GameStop, still reported like, hey, Metroid Dread's still at the top. Like people are still pre-ordering this game. Maybe this is like just collective and this was mostly bolstered by that initial hype. Either way though, seeing Metroid Dread at the top, really awesome. And I'm really excited to see when this game launches and, over the, the next year, because, sure, like I'm going to enjoy this game. You'll enjoy this game, but I want to see this game sell really well. So, I want to see that happen.
And that way we can get even more amazing games like Metroid Dread.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another thing too. This game doing well not only is great to like actually play it, but it means we'll get some more Metroid on the way. And speaking of more Metroid, one thing that we've talked about on the show, and I think we'll talk about in a future episode soon, is like things like besides Metroid, like Metroid video games, right? Like, we're talking like Metroid merch, or, maybe movies or anime, whatever, like cartoons, something like that. Like, something like a Castlevania style, like the Castlevania show on Netflix, like a style like that for a Metroid show would be sick. But recently there was also a pitched Lego idea for Samus and her ship. And I think even like Ridley was involved. And now another product idea for like the Lego idea site for Metroid Dread, and Samus and Emmy has been posted by the same developer, same creator of the original pitch.
Yeah,
so this was really
El
cool.
Diego is his user handle.
El Diego. This is really cool. What are your thoughts on this? Because I mean, at first glance, I think this looks awesome.
Yeah, this thing looks super awesome, and also really faithful, because a lot of the scenes that he recreates in the Legos are like shots from like that initial reveal trailer, which is so cool. Just the attention to detail that he's put into all these concepts. And yeah, just to clarify, the first concept that he did, it has not been canceled. It is still under review. So this isn't like a response to like a canceled project or anything. This is an additional campaign that he started. And last time I checked, it was at 1,000 backers. It needs to reach 10,000 before it's eligible to be reviewed by the Lego Ideas team. And so we're trying to get as many people to do that as possible. It's finally starting to make its rounds on the mainstream gaming outlets, so I think it has a pretty good chance of reaching that milestone, just like the first project did.
Yeah, the first one looked really good, and obviously had it had a lot of additions, like all these other things you could add, and this has like the recreation, like you said. This looks awesome. I love the different angles, pulled right from the trailer, and then you have the different Emmy colors. And it's completely faithful and like looks amazing. I wonder if these things are really ever gonna kind of see the light of day as official products, just knowing Nintendo. But I really love like the creativity and the work that goes into this, because this looks phenomenal. And I would absolutely, this honestly, in a way, like maybe like, I mean, I still think the first pitch was really good, but like just how well this guy was able to capture like Metroid Dread in Lego form. It just translates so well. And Emmy is such a cool toy. Like I feel like it's just a really sick looking character and would be great. Like just aside from the whole Metroid Dread, project in general, just Emmy is a really awesome. It's like a Bionicle looking at it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it looks like it kind of reminds me of like the Borox, but they're not quite as circular or spherical as the Borox.
Like the names and whatnot from Bionicle. Jesus. We got to get into that deeper some other time. Yeah, this looks dope. I mean, I really would love to see this back. I mean, I'm looking at the page now. It says it's like pretty much at 1,500 supporters, I think, at the moment. And then like there's still 604 days left. So I think it'll hit it.
Oh, definitely.
And certainly when the game gets closer to release, I think this will probably get more traction as well. And I wonder if like he'll add like some more stuff. Like now that we know like well, I don't want to say any spoilers, but the more we learn about Dread, I wonder if things will be added to this. is as far as I'll go.
Yeah,
I almost went a little.
Yeah, just to clarify for people who aren't aware who are listening right now, I have purposely opted out from watching the new Metroid Dread trailer. I believe it's the 30-second teaser that was just released. I've seen the pictures of the new Various suit online, but otherwise, like I don't know what happens in the trailer, and I don't want to know what happens. I want to go into this game blind outside of what I've already seen from the initial reveal trailer and the Sakamoto development diary. So yeah.
Yeah, I respect to you, man. I don't know how you do it. I love spoilers. I want the info immediately.
I went into both Infinity War and Endgame without watching a single trailer, so this is like a cakewalk compared to that.
Wow. See, like, I guess I didn't find any like internet spoilers to like spoil the script, but I definitely watched the trailers and whatnot. So I don't have that kind of discipline, and I've certainly consumed all of the Metroid Dread media that there's been out there. And thankfully, it really doesn't spoil much at all. So like, I've been happy about that. But that's just from my perspective. That said, I believe in a future episode we will go into one of those trailers. Doominal, you probably won't be there, or you'll be muted up, so you don't have to hear what it's about. But there's some juicy stuff in there that we'll likely cover. Yeah, this looks awesome, though. I really hope that this gets some traction, gets some legs. Phenomenal work. Really awesome. This guy's had a lot of talent. So
yeah, I especially like the detail he put on like those Emmy doors where you enter the Emmy zones. Like I thought that was such a cool idea of like how he utilized the pieces, and it looks like really close to like how they appear in the game too. Like. So awesome. He's such a creative dude. Like, meanwhile, I'm just over here like drawing really bad stick figures.
Hey man, art is art. I honestly also want to say that the suit looks really cool, like in Lego form.
Yes, it does.
A Lego Metroid game. I would be down for that. We've talked about spin-offs and like, hey, now that we have real Metroid games coming out, I'll take spin-offs.
Lego Metroid. Lego Metroid is the Federation Force we truly deserve.
That's Lego Metroid would be sick. That's I think enough for another episode as well. Something we got to get into. What a Lego Metroid be like? I'd totally be down. Now speaking of spoilers, we're not going to talk about any, but what I guess some people have been kind of avoiding somewhat have been the Metroid Dread reports. Like they've had some details that I would say aren't somewhat spoilery, but maybe they are. But this latest one that's come out is pretty much just going over like recapping the series. So we haven't gone too in depth on the Dread reports previously, I don't believe. If we have, we've kind of skimmed over, glossed over them. Maybe I'm just misremembering. But
I believe you did. I believe you did a full episode to like Volume 3 because that was a pretty meaty one.
Okay,
if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I think so far we've been just kind of giving spoilers, but I'm trying to balance it out here, so I'm doing my best. But that said, I know I've been reading them all. I'm not sure how much you've been reading of them.
I've read all of them, yeah.
Okay,
I don't think they've been spoilery at all, in my opinion. And obviously, I'm going pretty hardcore into like going in blind, but I don't think there's been any details that like diehard Metroid fans either didn't already know or wouldn't have been able to infer as of now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of how I've felt about most of the stuff that's come out about the game so far. It's like 90% of it is stuff that like you can kind of surmise is going to happen, or you bring up the Various suit. I'm not going to show it off or really talk about the details, but everyone knows that Samus is going to have other suit upgrades and variations available to her, and not just like the initial Dread suit that we've been shown.
At least a Varia and a gravity suit. Anything beyond that, like that could I personally do think there's going to be something beyond the gravity suit, but like obviously that's something
I would hope so.
That's obviously something we don't quite know about yet, but
I want them to bring back the arm blades. You know what I'm talking
Oh, the
about? Like
fusion
when
blades, yeah.
yeah, like what happened to those? I know we're gonna likely find out what happened with her suit, and it seems like her suit's really just going back to its mechanical form, whatever. But like, what happened to the blades? Like, I want some melee blade action. But either way, so we'll jump into the report. So I know you wanted to talk about this law because there's a specific part about it that really kind of got you going and really excited you, and I agreed. But mostly, this report is just kind of going over the saga of the 2D Metroid series, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Just from the original NES Troid all the way to Metroid Fusion, and no mention of Metroid Other M though. So I know Dak, you're very happy to see that.
Well, here's the thing: is that as much as I love Other M slander, you know, as much as the next person, it also doesn't mention any Metroid Prime stuff, which is obviously good in canon. So just because it's omitted here, unfortunately, it doesn't mean much for Other M as much as I would like it to. But I do like that Other M is not being mentioned at all. So that I'll take what I can get. Yeah. But yeah, it sticks to the main 2D games, goes into the original Metroid, like the NES Metroid. Even like I like how they even added like the original artwork, like just showing how far we've come from the original designs of some of these characters. Like Ridley, for example, is a glaring outlier there, all the way to through Super into Fusion, where you get to see a lot of those same characters kind of come through, and see how they've kind of evolved over time. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and a lot of that artwork is being shown in high definition for the first time. Like, especially the ones that stood out to me were some of those Samus Returns Chozo memories. Like, a lot of those have been limited to 240p. Because even if you play those on Dolphin, like, you can't natively upscale those photos because, or not Dolphin, excuse me, Citra, because Citra doesn't have AI upscaling, so you can't do anything like that. But so these are the first time we've seen a lot of those Chozo memories in, like, their native resolution without being limited to the 240p downgrading on the 3DS. So I thought those were pretty cool personally. But
Yeah,
that isn't
looked great.
the highlight that stood out to me. There was
Mm.
first off, even before I go into that, how cool is it that we're finally seeing Nintendo like actually acknowledge a Metroid anniversary? Like obviously it's only because they're trying to promote Dread. If there was no Metroid game, we wouldn't be hearing any of it. But just the fact that they're talking about it is just really cool and something that isn't really precedented. It's unprecedented.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far to say that they're celebrating the Metroid anniversary outright. Like
They're
it's really like
marketing
you
the
said, just
anniversary.
they're marketing. I mean, they are, but yeah, they're mostly doing it like you said because of Dread. So I'll take what I can get. I think it's fine. Like I honestly, it's awesome that they're talking about Metroid so often, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is cool that they've mentioned like okay, it's been this many years since we've gotten the last like new 2D Metroid, and it's been 35 years since the series started. Like all those kind of mentions, like it's awesome to like actually see them putting in at least a minimal effort to show off why these games are cool, why we like these games, and why people should try them out, and that's really what it's all about. I feel like a lot of the time they've just never really put in the effort to like actually show why Metroid is so cool and why it's so awesome and why people play it. And now they're doing that and they're going into like, even like story and lore aspects, which for me are just as important. I know a lot of people really, Metroid, the gameplay is obviously the core part of the experience, but the world and the story and all of that are just as important to me. So I like that they even go into those aspects of the franchise as well. So yeah, like to look at this report and you're getting like all these different screenshots and showing like what the game was actually about and then like talking about what the game's story was about, like that's just so cool to see it all like wrapped up here. It makes it actually feel like it matters in their like at least their eyes and in everyone else's, like hey, like this is something worth talking about, this is awesome, you should check it out. And it is like, and I love reading this stuff, especially like the fusion section, because I love going through that story, and it's just cool how like the Metroid story and experience has come through the ages, and it's still awesome. And they're going even farther now to actually promote it, which is great. And the 35th anniversary, thankfully, coming out the same time or being around the same time as Metroid Dread coming out. Uh, Video game gods helping us out here, I think.
Yeah, you can't really think of many better 35th anniversary gifts than like a 16-year-old rumored game, which is a sequel to a game that we got 19 years ago, nearly 2 decades ago. Like, there aren't really that many better ways that you can celebrate a 35th anniversary, if you ask me personally. But anyways, going back into this Dread report, and while you were actually doing that talking, I actually pulled it up because I wanted to read this exact quote here. But in the Super Metroid section specifically, there is a paragraph that intrigued the hell out of me personally.
Mm-hmm.
So it's right before Fusion. So if y'all want to pull this up on your ends too, you can. But it says transmission from the dev team. The Super Metroid game can be said to offer the greatest flexibility for exploration of the series. You can enjoy similar flexibility in the Metroid Dread game, depending on how you take advantage of your abilities. You might be able to find ways to obtain weapons, items, and abilities earlier than the intended timing. We encourage you to try to discover alternate routes of exploration. Dak, I cannot put into words just how much that excites me. Pretty much, I love most Metroid games, even the more linear ones, but my favorite type of Metroid game, and I talked about this on an episode with Andy, is this kind of freeform exploration where you're revisiting areas and where the game gives you the opportunities to use the mechanics in ways that maybe weren't intended to be used. Kind of like Super Metroid. Even though Super Metroid isn't my all-time favorite Metroid game, I'm not even sure if it's in my top 5, which
Oh my God! Say it ain't so.
yeah, that's why I'm not saying it while Andy is here, obviously, or else I would be a dead man.
Yeah.
but no, I still love Super Metroid, and one of the things that I love about that game is the power that it gives the player. The more you understand the fundamentals and the mechanics and the physics and everything, and there hasn't really been a Metroid game that has replicated that since then. I think the closest we've gotten is Zero Mission, but even Zero Mission to an extent, a lot of those alternate routes are a lot of those are pre-planned, like they're predetermined alternate routes that you can take. There's not a similar level of exploiting the mechanics that you can in Super Metroid. And the dev team right here, they specifically mentioned Dread, saying that it's going to be similar to the way you explore the game in Super Metroid, and that pretty much alleviates the last worry I had with Metroid Dread. And I use worry in loose quotations because I love Samus Returns, but one of my biggest criticisms with the game is that you don't really revisit the areas unless you're going for the final 100% sweep. You can complete Samus Returns without traversing or backtracking to a previous area at all. You just go from Area 1, Area 2, Area 3, and so on and so forth until you beat the game, unless you're going for 100%. And if what this paragraph is hinting at is true, then it seems like Dread is going back to that old school formula of revisiting multiple areas, of utilizing your mechanics to get early items in ways that maybe either were intended or ways that either weren't intended. It seems like this game is trying to give a lot of additional freedom to the player that the series hasn't embarked on in a long time, and that has me really excited because to me that's my kind of Metroid. I don't know about you and what your thoughts are on it, if you think I'm really overblowing this, but I'd love to hear what you think.
No, I mean, I think you're right on point. I mean, I think they're outright saying that, like, yeah, you'll be able to, like, sequence break. And, like, that's kind of, like, what I got from this. Like, earlier than the intended timing, like, it's all talking about, like, coming up with your ways to kind of break the game and figure out your own path, right? Instead of just a path that the developers come up for you. So, yeah, I mean, it seems like they're outright encouraging sequence breaking, if not something close to it. But absolutely, encouraging this kind of style of Metroid game is definitely welcome. And my favorite 2D Metroid is Metroid Fusion, but that's not to say that I don't like something more like or Super or even Zero Mission. So this I'm super excited about. And I think I was already kind of feeling it would be that way when we saw gameplay initially when the game was revealed, because they added like the slide and you have like the spider walls and whatnot. Like it felt like there were all different kinds of mechanics that would be useful ways to get to places you shouldn't be able to get to at certain points. And it seems like it's kind of trying to streamline and encourage players to be creative and not just go from A to B. So, I'm totally with you, man. I think this is going to be really fun and really cool. And I want to see I want to see the skill ceiling, because the game seems very accessible, right? And we know like it's going to be accessible story-wise. And from a gameplay perspective, I think, is going to be more accessible than previous 2D Metroids have been.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I want to see how far people can push the game, and this is right up that kind of alley, right? Where it seems like they're encouraging, and hoping that people are like, trying to find the fullest optimized potential of the combination of abilities and things that they're going to give players to use and whatnot. So I'm excited for the other upgrades that we haven't seen yet, because they could be even more wild and powerful than we've seen. I hope obviously they will be, but maybe even more than we expect. So I'm totally with you. This is really a major, probably the most important part of this dev update, right? Of this report, I would say, other than the really cool artwork, which is really cool.
I would argue this is more important than that for me, because at least for me, like, the initial Metroid Dread trailer, like, it alleviated pretty much most of the concerns I had going out of Samus Returns, which again, I really enjoyed Samus Returns. It's a fantastic game. You should definitely go play it if for some reason you haven't already. But, there's a lot of issues in that game that I was wondering if Mercury Steam was going to iron out. And that first reveal trailer pretty much ironed out the most of them, with the exception of, those sequential environments. And this paragraph seems, again, it's not outright confirming it, it's being a little vague, but it seems to be hinting at that it's going to be going back to that old school map philosophy, which, if that's the case, that's pretty much the final word I have. And at this point, I'm just like, my hype is at like an 11 out of 10 right now.
Yeah, man, I definitely agree. I can't wait for this game, and I think they're pretty much on the right track in all aspects of the game from what I've seen. It looks like it's a lot of fun and plays really well. The graphics are great and look really cool, and I love like the aesthetic of the game and how like Samus is presented as a character. The story looks like it's going to be awesome and not only follow up on what happened in Fusion and the other games, but has a lot of really cool like new stuff, and is finally going into like aspects of the Chozo that we've been waiting for, and I'm really interested to see like where the story is going to go next. So right now, yeah, like I feel like they're really going to hit this out of the park, I hope, and it looks like it's going to be a really awesome game. So this definitely puts it instills some more confidence in me as well. Not that I wasn't already confident this game would be a must buy, but definitely seeing that, I'm hopeful, and I'm hoping that they can follow through on these words, because it is still words, but I'm confident. I hope they can follow through.
Absolutely. Well, we are about to run into the 30-minute mark, so I'd say we do our final little highlight really quickly before we go into our main topic today, which is Axiom Verge 2 shadow dropped out of nowhere, RKO out of nowhere, and yeah, from the Nindie Direct. I have not played it yet. Dak, I'm not sure if you've played it. But
well, that's the thing, is that I think Andy definitely has played it.
Yes.
I have not played it, and it turns out you have not played it. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the game.
I'm happy that it's out. I'm definitely gonna play it when I can. I'm in the middle of a couple of other game playthroughs right now. I'm finally just finishing up my Bloodstained playthrough, which I've been slowly making my way through my second one since I want to say early June, right before E3. And then I've also been playing some other games on the side, kind of going with that, along with Master Chief Collection, doing those weekly challenges and whatnot. The Halo Infinite beta from a couple weeks ago, that was a lot of fun. But yeah, now that things are starting to clear up and school's starting again, maybe I will just quickly buy AV2 and just get that out of the way before Dread comes out. Because obviously Axiom Verge 1, phenomenal game, as you have already discussed on the podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, speaking of which, we did an Inspired by Metroid on that, and we'll likely do an Inspired by Metroid on Axiom Verge 2. I mean, if Andy was here, he'd be talking to us about this game, and I'm sure he's like, somehow he knows that we're talking about this right now, and he just like wants to be here and like wants to let us know about Axiom Verge 2. He was very excited about it when it got shadow dropped, essentially. I was also very excited, but I have not gotten to playing it. I've been addicted to Destiny 2 for the past month, and I put in almost 200 hours in like 4 weeks. So really enjoying that game. Also, Splitgate has been pretty cool. You mentioned the Halo Master Chief challenges, and I've just gotten the same, like, I love doing those for the unlocks, but I just got the same feeling from doing quests and bounties in Destiny 2, so that's kind of where I'm at. But I will find some time to play Axiom Verge 2, and we'll give it a full review and a full IBM, full Inspired by Metroid and whatnot. From what I've seen, though, it looks I mean, we already kind of knew aesthetically it looked very different from the first one, but even gameplay wise, it looks, and as a whole package, it looks pretty different from the first Axiom Verge. So I'm not exactly sure what to
Yeah,
expect.
there's a bigger focus on melee combat this time around, it seems like.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because I like melee combat in Metroidvanias. So like Guacamelee, I thought was really good, like specifically, and I love kind of melee combat. Kind of makes it feel like beat 'em up, but I like a solid mix of gunplay too. And I think it's interesting that it seems like that might not be the focus of Axiom Verge 2, at least maybe not in the outset, because the first game, from what I remember, was all about having all these different kinds of crazy weapons. So and to not have like a mix of both, like to have all these different kind of crazy weapons and like cool melee stuff, I feel like that would be the more natural progression for an Axiom Verge 2. Who knows? I still got to give it a full fair check, but yeah, we'll go more in depth on Axiom Verge 2 in the coming weeks as we not only get to play it ourselves, but let all of you get a chance to play it, so you can come to your own conclusion before listening to us. So
Yeah, and if anyone else, if anyone listening is interested in checking it out, it's literally only $20, so you can get this game from dirt cheap right out of the gate. Just came out, so yeah, if you're curious to do that, check it out on the eShop, Xbox. Is it on Xbox? I know it's on PlayStation and PC. I don't know, can't remember if it's on Xbox too, but
I think it's on PlayStation, Xbox, and then on the Epic Game Store.
yeah, that's
I
right.
think.
That's right. It's got Epic exclusivity. That's right.
Yes, so I got to open up that instead of it just being on Steam. But hey, whatever. So yeah, so we'll talk about that in the future, but let's jump into finally our main topic of the day, of the night, of the afternoon, depending on when you're listening to this. And we've talked about this actually on Twitter. We've talked about this in the Omega Metroid Discord server quite a few times. We were just talking about it before the show, not even just, preparing for it, but the golden age, the golden era of the Metroid series, right? Which most people consider the golden age of Metroid to really be in like that mid 2000s era, between Metroid Prime, Metroid Fusion, and then towards the end of the decade as those last few games came out before we kind of got to the Dark Ages, which all began, as far as I'm concerned, with the game that should not be named. So, we want to kind of go into this because we've had a lot of time thinking about these kinds of games over the years, but recently we've talked about it because it's something that we've looked at, back fondly on, and also feel like we might be on a new similar age of Metroid games, in the 2020s. So, it's cool to kind of look back and see like how those games were like when they came out and the influence they had and how it went over the years. Living through that as both myself and Doominal did, albeit younger, but lived through that kind of era of Metroid. And Andy certainly has lived through it, but in a different context too. He started out like kind of earlier in the series than like myself, for example. So yeah, we wanted to kind of jump into that and reminisce a little bit about the golden age of Metroid. And I know obviously, Doominal, we got to start off with the dual release of Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion in 2002, right? Like that is we might disagree on when the golden age ended, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can agree on when it started.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not every day that you get two Metroid games, two phenomenal Metroid games, mind you, releasing on the same day. In fact, it's never been done since. That's how insane and breaking the meta that day did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting that it wasn't even just like two games releasing. It was two major games, two new games. Like they weren't remakes, they weren't I mean, I guess in a way one of them was like a spin-off somewhat, but like they weren't like, it wasn't like Metroid Prime Pinball and Hunters coming out on the same day or something like that. Like these are two major games. And I remember specifically, because this is how I got into Metroid, I got Metroid Prime and Metroid Fusion for Christmas that year. And I got the 2-in-1 Prima Guide, and I got both of those games. And I knew Samus from the Smash Bros. Series, so that's kind of how I got into Metroid. But I remember specifically feeling like, oh wow, these games must be really good if like two of them are coming out the same day. Like that like you said, that was unheard of. Like even for other series like Zelda or anything else I had played, like two games coming out at the same time and both of them being big, it must be a big deal. Like this must be a huge, and it was. Both games were awesome. So I don't, whether or not you could do that today debatable. The fact that they were both the GameCube and the Game Boy for Nintendo obviously was the situation that allowed that to happen. But I just feel like that kind of release it was so huge in my eyes as a kid, because I was like, wow, this must be a really, truly great series. If like I got this cool character in Smash alongside all these other, major Nintendo characters that I, know from playing in these other games. And then now there's Samus's getting 2 games. Like, I got to play them. And so I feel like that was there's no better way to kick off like an era of game releases than 2 major ones, both for console and for portable. It set the tone, right? Because now you're like, okay, you can expect great Metroid games on both your Game Boy or DS or whatever, or your GameCube, your Wii, etc. Like your console, no matter where you are, you can get good Metroid. That set the tone, and that was true for almost a decade.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth at the end there. Like, no matter.
I'm sorry, man.
Oh no. That's good. You don't have to apologize. No, but basically, you yeah. No matter you don't have to own either a GBA or a GameCube or I mean, you have to own at least one of those, but it doesn't matter.
You gotta have one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not like you're limited. It's not like, oh, if you own. You have to own a specific.
Like you weren't
console.
missing out.
Yeah, exactly. Like no matter which one of those consoles you owned, like there was a fantastic game awaiting for you regardless. And if you did happen to own both, then you get 2 fantastic games that also offer distinctly different experiences as well. So it's not like it's more of the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point, is that they were both distinctly different experiences, not just in perspective, right? Like, obviously, one's a 3D FPS, one's a 2D action adventure game in the Game Boy, but they look different, but like the actual experience is how the game's played. Metroid Prime is more open and you're more exploratory, a little more backtracking. Fusion, a lot more linear, a lot more narrative heavy. So like it wasn't even just like, even the gameplay was different, like the story is different, the settings were like everything was so drastically different. It gave you 2 wildly different perspectives on the same franchise, and that was something that you really don't get. And for not only a lot of series, but you don't get it at such a short period of time at the same time, Like, for Metroid Prime, I think that's maybe why I had such a huge, I guess, appreciation for Metroid Fusion, because I didn't feel like I was lacking on, like, the exploration aspect in Metroid Fusion, because I was playing Metroid Prime.
Yeah.
And, well, it was like I had my fill there, which I guess, you got to separate them eventually. But still, like, at the time, I had the full Metroid experience. I was getting the story and the lore and the backstory and, like, that direct, like, action, like, even horror survival. And I was getting the open FPS I'm getting, like, the full package by getting both of those 2 games. And the fact that they came out pretty much at the same time kind of really drove that point further forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I told this story during my first episode, back when we were talking about trilogy controls and all that. But my first Metroid game was Metroid 2, but I was too young to really understand and get a grasp of the game. I was too young. I, of course, have since then beaten it, and if you want to hear my thoughts, you can check out an episode from a couple episodes back when me and Andy talked about it. But that's not the topic of this episode. So after I put down Metroid 2, I was in a Blockbuster one day, rip Blockbuster, and I saw the box art for Metroid Prime. And of course, at this point, I'd recognized Samus from Super Smash Brothers. She was my favorite character in that game. I loved how she looked compared to the other characters. I loved reading all the Metroid trophy lore, so I was already like really curious about the series. And when I saw that was my real introduction into Metroid, I believe, was, convincing my dad to let me rent the game, take it home, and, the rest is history, Obviously, I'm not going to go too much in depth into actually Prime itself. That's for a definitive ranking episode. But yeah, Fusion.
The GOAT.
Yeah, it is. It's my favorite game of all time, quite literally. Fusion, it's actually funny, because Fusion, much like you, that's actually my favorite 2D Metroid game, despite really loving that kind of open freeform exploration of Super and Zero Mission. Fusion's actually my second favorite 2D Metroid, because specifically because I love the way that the environments change as you progress through the game.
Yes.
Like that's something that
agree.
like no other Metroid game has really capitalized on. Like, for instance, there's one moment in particular that always stands out to me, and that's when you're going up the elevator It's about halfway through the game. You've already gotten the various suit at this point, but you're going back through the main elevator onto the main deck, and the power gets cut like midway through your trip, and you're stuck there. And so you're trying to figure out, like, oh man, what's going on? And then you realize, oh, I have to carve my way through the maintenance tunnels to make my way onto the main deck, and then find a way to turn the power back on from there. And then from there you meet Yakuza, the space jump boss, and you have to tear through all the vines and all that. And just I love that whole sequence. And yeah, and so that's definitely what stands out to me about Fusion. Not even necessarily its story, because I think the story's good too, but it's how the environments progress along with you as you upgrade. And that's not really something that Metroid games typically do. Other than like maybe upgrading an enemy after you reach a certain threshold. But that's just the enemy, not the actual environment itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I took the words out of your mouth earlier, and then you just took what I was gonna say, because I 100% agree. And that particular part of the game is one of my favorite parts, because yeah, you get to go in through like the back end of the station, right, and you're going essentially inside the walls. And as you go deeper, like, and you backtrack, but parts of the different rooms and areas become more congested with vines and vegetation, and you'll run into enemies like caught up in the vegetation that you could free and kill or leave. And yeah, and then like you go even deeper, and it turns into like it's like moldy. I love that part of Fusion. Absolutely right. I love how the world evolves and morphs and metamorphosizes, as almost like Samus is kind of morphing into a new form too. It's absolutely awesome, and I wonder if Dread will capture that same thing. But even like Metroid Prime too, I think had a different kind of aspect to it, because Metroid Fusion is, as it is what it was, it felt like a Nintendo game, but like Metroid Prime felt different. Like it felt like something completely different from like the usual Nintendo game from what I played, and I really hadn't played anything else like it on Nintendo systems. Obviously, I'd played like Halo 1, around the same, or I guess, well, Metroid Prime came out. Did it come out before or after?
It
I can't
came out
even remember
after,
now.
because Halo came out.
After,
Halo came
yeah.
out in 2001. Prime was 2002.
One, and this, yes, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, I'm always mixing up the years and thinking it's mixed up. But yeah. So I'd already played Halo 1. Obviously, I'd played like Golden Eye on the N64. But it felt like I was like, wow, this is an actual awesome FPS experience, like on my GameCube. Like, this is so cool, and it with a main Nintendo franchise, not like a third party game, which I wasn't thinking in those terms back then, but you kind of knew the difference.
Yeah,
And
it's like
yes,
it's like one of those things you play like you said, like this doesn't feel it's not, at least at that time, it's not something that you were used to Nintendo releasing, because like you had a very specific image of Nintendo. You had your Marios, you had your Donkey Kongs, you had your Legend of Zeldas, your Kirby's, your Star Fox, and while they're all very distinct, they all, maybe Zelda being somewhat of an exception, they all kind of fit into like this similar mold of like art style and aesthetic and tone. And then you have Metroid, which just it feels like something completely different outside of it, and but it still has that signature like Nintendo seal of quality that's so distinct with Nintendo at that same time. And that's what I think what made Metroid so special, not just to us, but like to other people who were experiencing their first Metroid game at that time as well.
yeah, and it made it feel like a really big deal again. Like even going back to like both games were being announced or releasing at the same time, but Metroid Prime in general, like getting this big 3D first person game made it feel like just a bigger experience. Like obviously the Halo comparisons were there, and that was like a really big deal at the time. So like to have kind of like Nintendo's equivalent to that was cool. And obviously for Metroid fans, it was a huge deal because this was a leap into a completely different perspective and the third dimension for a series that hadn't made that jump yet, didn't make the jump in the N64 era either, right? So obviously a lot of Metroid fans were skeptical. For me, I wasn't a Metroid fan until these games came out, so I didn't like have that kind of original like bias, right? Like I went to it and I was like, oh my god, like this series not only has like this 2D game, it has this awesome 3D like FPS like Halo game. Like this is so cool. I didn't have that same like, I didn't have that hesitance, of like, will this game be good or not, because I'm not sure. It's unlike any other Metroid game before. For me, I was like, oh, this is what Metroid is, like right out of the gate. That's what my understanding of Metroid were these two different styles of games. And I guess that's kind of why both of them stuck with me as my favorites over all the years, because I've always enjoyed those two from the outset. So Yeah, obviously, absolutely huge that these two games came out in 2002. And it wasn't too long until we got a bunch of more games. Like we had a gap year in 2003, but I think that's pretty acceptable considering everybody was busy playing two games, right? Like you had 2 years, so you had two games right there. Boom. It wasn't until 2004 that we got more Metroid games because we ended up getting Metroid Zero Mission early in 2004, around in February in North America, and then so on throughout the rest of the world. And then I believe Metroid Prime Pinball came out in, I believe, October of in North America, followed by Metroid Prime Echoes, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, which came out in November.
You're getting those reversed. Prime 2 came out. Yeah, Prime 2 came out in November of 2004. Then Pinball came out in
2005.
Yeah, 2005.
That's what it is. Gotcha. So Zero Mission 2004, and then Echoes in late 2004, and then Pinball in 2005. So still,
actually,
okay.
Actually, there's a third one we're missing as well. The Metroid Prime Hunters First Hunt demo, which launched alongside the DS, which came out. The DS came out shortly after, or maybe it was before Echoes released. I can't remember when the DS came out. I think it was a week after. I think it was a week after Echoes came out because I believe it was
Echoes was November 15th, and then the Hunter's First Hunt demo was the 21st.
Yeah. So it was like the very next week. So that's probably the closest we've gotten to like a Prime Fusion kind of dual release since then. But yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty crazy to think about. So now that I have my timeline correct here, just in the span of from February of 2004 until October of 2005, you have just under 2 years. You have three. You have a big remake of one of the biggest games in the franchise. You have a sequel to Metroid Prime. You get the demo for another Metroid Prime spinoff, and then another spinoff. So this is where I think the golden era. The golden age of Metroid really this is when it's in full gear, right? Like we're getting spin-offs, we're getting demos, we're getting sequels, we're getting remakes. That's when okay, they have faith in this franchise.
It's Nintendo firing Metroid on all fronts. They're making sure that there is they are making sure that there is a Metroid game on every single one of their platforms. Oh, you still have a Game Boy Advance? Here's another Metroid game. Oh, our GameCube owners, you want more Metroid? Here's another fully packed sequel to that game you really enjoyed. Oh, you're about to buy our brand new handheld. Here's a demo of what you can expect. But you know what? That's only a demo. And while the full game isn't quite ready for that, have another spin-off the following year while you're waiting for the actual version of this little demo we initially gave you.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that even more was coming right after this too. And all of this was received pretty highly regarded, I would say, for the most part. Metroid Zero Mission coming out first in February 2004 received pretty well as a remake that just had significant improvements in almost all respects, even though maybe it might have been criticized for its length. Zero Mission, I remember coming out, and that was really mind-blowing for me because I hadn't played the original Metroid at all before that. So to be able to kind of play that in a new way, it was modernized perfectly for a kid like me, and the artwork has always stuck out to me, the very bold, heavy style that aesthetically is just I think aesthetically one of the best looking games overall, especially for a 2D kind of style.
Yeah, I love the Western comic / Eastern manga art kind of hybrid art style that they adapted for that game. I think it works really well for the whole game. And actually, I think the length of Zero Mission is actually a plus in its favor because that's a kind of game that's meant to be replayed over and over again. And for
Agreed.
me, Metroid Zero Mission is the perfect game where I can just pop in, beat it in one setting, and I will feel just as satisfied as the other 100 times I've done it. That feeling, because usually when after you play a game for the first time, you still really enjoy it, but you never get quite that same feeling, like Metroid Prime, or most recently for me, I'd say Breath of the Wild. I will replay that game at some point, but it's not going to be the same as when I've played it for the first time. Zero Mission, every single time I play, it's just as good, if not better, than when I played it for the very first time, which I think makes Zero Mission special. And also, Zero Mission for me personally, this was my very first 2D Metroid game. I actually didn't play Fusion until around 2009, 2010-ish. I can't remember quite the year. Yeah, I was a late bloomer to Fusion. But Zero Mission, I got this right around when it came out. And so And so this was my first, well, technically Metroid 2 was my first 2D Metroid, but again, I only played that for 30 minutes. Zero Mission, I played all the way through and beat it. Since then I've beat it like it's easily the Metroid game I've beaten the most. You know, I've 100%ed it numerous times. I've done the ludicrous hard mode 15% run, which is it takes Zero Mission from one of the easiest games to one of the most brutally difficult games ever. For anyone who has ever tried that, you totally understand. But yeah, Zero Mission will always have a special place in my heart for that. And also, the speed booster puzzles are amazing.
Yeah, the Zero Mission is a very nostalgic game for me as well. I think it was a game I got for Easter, oddly enough. It came out not too long after that. And yeah, I mean, I really loved the extra components and like, the kind of mysterious, like unknown upgrades you would get and like the end game content, like the Zero Suit section, I thought was really cool. And it gave me that kind of lore that I was really like the old like the original kind of lore. Like Metroid Fusion has new kind of story and Metroid Prime is pretty light on story, but this kind of gives like the core aspects of Metroid, which I thought was sick. And also it hooked up to Metroid Prime, I believe.
No, Fusion hooked up to Prime.
Fusion hooked up to
but
Metroid Prime. Yeah,
you could unlock the original Metroid in Zero Mission.
that's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was, and that's how I actually played the original Metroid. So awesome game. And I remember not having to wait for like Christmas or my birthday for having to get it. But I did have to wait for Christmas for Metroid Prime 2 Echoes because that released November 15th of 2004. So just several months after Zero Mission released in February, we had in November Metroid Prime 2 Echoes come out. We had advertisements for that game. There were a bunch of ads in magazines, and it was a follow-up to one of the most critically acclaimed GameCube games of all time. Had a follow-up in a pretty short time span as well for such a major game, and I very much remember waiting to get to the for Christmas for this game. And I remember I think my parents even trolling me a little bit, saying that they weren't sure if Santa was going to get it for me, and I was freaking out because I wanted to play this game so badly. And I don't know about you, I was very excited for when it finally did come out because I feel like I no lifed it until I was done.
Yeah, Prime 2, by the time that marketing campaign started, this was at that point where I knew that Metroid was like my favorite series. After playing through Prime and Zero Mission numerous times at this point, like the way those games captured me like in such a unique way, like I was all in during the Prime 2 marketing campaign. And it's actually funny. So I vividly remember for my birthday, which is September 1st, by the way. So that's coming up real soon. But at the time in 2004, for my birthday, my aunt pre-ordered the game for me, and my birthday present was basically the GameStop receipt. And I was like, and it was in a round table. I remember that, and I was just I was losing my mind. I was so excited. But yeah, and then yeah, I also got I was also subscribed to Nintendo Power at the time, and
Yep.
for people that were subscribed to Nintendo Power at the time, you could get a free copy of the Metroid Prime 2 bonus disc, or the demo disc, which I still have, by the way. I'm looking at it right now in my my Metroid shrine that I have set up. And yeah, this demo disc was really cool. I played through that demo numerous times before the game came out because I believe that this hold on, my laptop. Okay, hold on. I thought my laptop was running out of battery. That was just my screensaver going on. We're good. Sorry about that. Yeah, my screen dim. I was like, what? But no. Anyways, yeah, I played through that demo multiple times. There's also a bunch of bonus features on it, a couple trailers. There was a Metroid timeline that had all of the games released up to that point. So this was how I like found out about all the other games in the series. Metroid 2, the OG Metroid I knew obviously because of Zero Mission at that time. Super Metroid, I had never seen Super Metroid in action before up until that demo disc, so that was really cool as well. And yeah, and I believe it came out like a couple months before the game released, or maybe it was sooner. My child brain just thought it was a couple months because when you're a kid, time moves at a much slower pace. But yeah, everything just leading up to that game was just such a wild ride, and you know, I think the game absolutely lives up to it. Obviously, Metroid Prime I think is just a little bit better, but Prime 2, and this might be a bit of a controversial take. I think just about everything in Prime 2 is better than Prime 1 with the exception of like a couple of key things. And the two key things that Prime does, I think, is what puts it a little bit above Echoes for me. But like, man, Echoes, the art direction, like Metroid Prime already had a really good art direction, but man, Prime 2 just goes a step further with that art, in my opinion. Especially like stepping into Sanctuary Fortress for the first time. That's like a top 5 gaming moment for me. Stepping into Sanctuary Fortress and just being blown away about all this artwork that Retro Studios created, and how it feels like this living, breathing technological place that I just never experienced in really any medium before, let alone a GameCube game. The music, I think the music was an even bigger step up from Prime 1's already phenomenal soundtrack. The boss battles, I know this is a super hot take for a lot of people. I think the boss battles are freaking incredible. I love the Spider Guardian. I even love the Boost Guardian, man. I love pretty much all of Echo's bosses. There's a couple of boring ones, like you got the Jump Guardian, which is just like whatever. You got the Alpha Splinter, which is like okay, whatever. But like most of these boss battles are standouts. Quadraxis, Emperor Ing, and all the other ones that I mentioned. Amorbus, that's a pretty good early boss battle in my opinion. But yeah,
I would say that there's a solid case for Metroid Prime 2 being the best Metroid Prime, to be honest. And it was, I think, considering the time they put the game together, it's obviously built very much on the original, but it's equivalent to me like Majora's Mask to Ocarina of Time. Like it's very like it's content heavy. It's obviously like darker literally, but even beyond that, I think it builds very well on the original like Metroid Prime foundation. Like you said, it gives like its own identity like aesthetically, and it puts like its own spin and style on like what Prime introduced to the series. I personally really love the ammo system and like going into the dark world and all of that. That really spoke to the FPS gamer in me and added like a little bit of survival aspect and strategy to what you're going to use. And I loved how all the different weapons operated together. Enemy types, bosses, agreed. And yeah, this was such a really comprehensive, I think, follow up to Metroid Prime. It definitely lived up to the hype and added like a little more pizzazz, a little more difficulty, it was more visceral, it was more surreal. Awesome game, and it was awesome that we got it only 2 short years right after Metroid Prime. So a really, really great game, and something that I would definitely want to talk about more on the show, and also can't wait to play in mouse and keyboard because that's the best way to play a Metroid Prime game. Speaking of Metroid Prime, though, we did get more Metroid Prime literally in the next year or so right after that. So as you said, a week later, the Metroid Prime Hunter's first hunt demo came out because it officially released with the Nintendo DS, which came out the same month in 2004. So I remember getting this bundled with my DS and playing this so much. Obviously, I played Hunters itself a lot more, but this was even more. I mean, Metroid. There were so many mind-blowing moments as a Metroid fan back then. Cause like, oh my god, Metroid Prime, Metroid Fusion dropping, Zero Mission remake, awesome. Echo's awesome. Now I'm getting a multiplayer Metroid game on my DS. Like, this is crazy. And this was just a demo, but like you knew when you were playing it that you were gonna get a little more. That said, it took so long. Like it took almost 2 years to actually finally get that the real actual game. But I remember as a kid playing this demo, like to like grinding it to dust in terms of how much I played it until the final Hunters game actually came out.
Yeah, I played the crap out of this demo, both the single player training modes as well as the multiplayer with other friends. Because again, like everyone that had a DS had a copy of the game, so like that was like a free multiplayer experience right out of the gate, even though you only had 3 maps, but still. But yeah, I played so much of this game even before I even got a DS, because I didn't get my DS until the following year. But even before then, like if I was ever at Target, like they would always have the DS on the demo kiosk with Hunters in there, and so I was always on there every time I was taking a Target, just playing that first Hunt demo up until I got my own DS.
And yeah, that it was packed with the original like DS, like the fat DS, and I remember like anywhere you would when you like go to like any kind of place that had like a crane game or like some kind of game you could win, like, iPods or,
Yeah.
gift cards. And, anytime I would see a DS, like I would see those DS with the Metroid Prime Hunters, like first hunt right on it. I would see those everywhere. When I went to play hockey, they had the crane game at the ice rink, and that was there. I go to other ice rinks for other games, and they'd have them there. You go to like, the rest stops on the side of highways and long car trips, and they'd be there too. It was everywhere. I thought it was so awesome. And I was like, wow, there was no shortage of people to play against for sure, even though I pretty much just, played with like whichever of my friends that really was willing to play as much as I was willing to play. It was. And honestly, I don't even. I know we talked about this, me and Andy, on a previous episode, but I don't even remember like being like waiting so hard. I guess because I was just young still. But like the wait between the first Hunt demo and then Hunters actually releasing didn't feel too bad, I think.
I disagree.
Just because
I remember waiting pretty hard for that game.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't ready for it, but it wasn't like I was like I knew it was gonna come out, and it was like I had Metroid Prime and I had Echoes and I had Zero Mission, so I kind of was like, hey, it'll, and then I had the demo. I was like, I guess I just wasn't like. I don't know. I don't remember ever having that like feeling of, oh, when's this game gonna come out? It was more like this game's gonna be awesome when it comes out for me, I guess. And I would play that like the short single player versions of the game over and over again until I could find someone to play with me.
I think
one game I didn't.
I think. Or sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
interrupt
go
you.
ahead.
Okay, well,
Go ahead.
I guess the thing with me, which I guess why it felt so long maybe as a kid, is because I was keeping track of like all the initial release dates. So initially, the game was originally supposed to come out in January of 2005. Like it was supposed to come out like
Right.
shortly after the DS came out. Obviously, that didn't happen. It got pretty significantly delayed till the summer, and then it got delayed again till November, and then finally it got delayed a final time until I want to say March of 2006, and that was eventually when it came out. And so I was just like on top of like all those release dates and watching it get pushed back again and again, especially as a kid, because again, as a kid, time flows much slower. So like 6 months can feel like 3 years as a kid. But yeah,
That's true. Yeah. And then after that, 2005, we had Metroid Prime Pinball, which I actually don't even think I played until many years later. It's kind of just one of those games that I was happy that it was out, and it was really cool that there were different Metroid games to play, but it wasn't something that I think I like needed to play. I also was very much into Pokemon Pinball, which is in my eyes, a superior pinball game as much as much on a Metroid podcast. But I did like this game when I did eventually play it. But I do remember not actually getting it when it first came out.
I'm actually surprised that I played this when it came out, because I don't think I was. It looked interesting, but not something like I need right now. But then my mom and I were in Costco one time, and I saw pinball that was on sale. I can't remember how much DS games cost back then. I can't remember if it was $30 or $40, but it was like half off at Costco.
They're like 35 or something.
Yeah, but it was like half off at Costco, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, can I get this?" And she was like, "Yeah," and yeah, the rest is history. And obviously, I love pinball for the memes that it has in the Metroid community. But even the memes aside, unironically, I think it's a great pinball game. It's a lot of fun to play. It's obvious. It's a really cool blend of like the traditional Metroid experience and pinball. The only thing it doesn't quite translate over is like the kind of Metroidvania formula. Like they didn't like every single pinball table is kind of like it's basically a level by level basis. You can choose which order you do it in, but it's not like you can freely flow from one pinball table to the next. That's kind of the only thing that I wish that they incorporated in the game. The one thing that I felt was missing, but otherwise, like there's so much creative levity that they do to make this feel like a genuinely it feels like there's a lot of love really put into this spinoff. It feels like a genuine love letter to Metroid in pinball form, and I really like it.
I do remember the one thing I think that stuck out to the most to me, what I remember most of this game, is that it came with the Rumble Pack for the DS, which I don't think I ever owned, and I don't think many people had it, so I didn't really... I think there was maybe a Yoshi game or something my sister had that maybe would have used it. I don't remember, but I remember that was the one thing. It was like a Rumble Pack for the DS, and I was like, okay, like I don't know if I ever need that, but sure.
And the Rumble Pack was compatible with Hunters too, so it was nice having that ahead of time.
Yeah, I think it was actually sold with it, so it was probably one of the ways you could end up getting it. But then we would had the next game's coming out. Finally, we had the follow up to that first Hunt demo, but this is personally where I would say is the tail end of the golden era, right? These are the last two major releases of the golden era of Metroid, and they come in the form of Metroid Prime Hunters, which released on the DS in March of 2006, and then Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, which released in August 2007. I remember by then I was like deep into like Insider on the forums and all these different communities. I was playing like game battles and whatnot. So I remember when Metroid Prime Hunters came out, and while I don't remember exactly when I got it, I want to say I might have even gotten it around Easter time again. Those games and Pokemon Troze I got for Easter. I remember those. I remember that. Pokemon Troze, great game, by the way. But I remember specifically getting it for that holiday for some reason. Anyway, Metroid Prime Hunters finally coming out. It was like one of those major like Wi-Fi connection, games, right? You had like Mario Kart DS, you had Animal Crossing, you had this game, you had Metroid Prime Hunters. And while there were other games that kind of took advantage of it, I feel like Metroid Prime Hunters is one of like the biggest Wi-Fi connection games for the DS, and it's a game that I personally played probably the probably the Metroid game I've played the most of. I loved this game, especially by this time it was 2006 when it came out, so I'd been playing Halo 2 for 2 years and Halo for longer. So I never owned an Xbox until Halo 3 came out in 2007. So this was really like the only first-person multiplayer shooter I had access to at my house. And so I played the absolute hell out of this game. I was on Wi-Fi all the time. I played, I would play against like in the actual in like the actual arenas, playing against bots. I was playing the campaigns. I was in like clans for this. I played it on game battles. I did everything for Metroid Prime Hunters until like the freeze glitchers and the hackers kind of ruined it. But the initial like years of Metroid Prime Hunters, some of the most favorite and like nostalgic times I've had in gaming because of just like the friends I made and all the different forums and communities and teams I was on, and talking to people through the mic on the hinge and the DS, sitting in my bed like doing like clan talks on Alanos Gateway and like battles on Harvester, which is one of my favorite maps of all time in like any FPS game. And I've always wanted to recreate it and have done so in other like games. The characters, awesome. Like, it was the first time that I felt like Metroid was really like expanding the universe too. Like, obviously the Metroid Prime series had that, and like Metroid Fusion expanded on the story, and then we had like Dark Samus and whatnot in Metroid Prime 2. But like this, there were like all new characters from like all these different parts of like the universe, and these big powers we hadn't seen before, and it was again felt so revolutionary to me. Like all these different characters with their own morph ball forms and their different weapons, the different like heads up displays that would change depending on what character you'd use. I love this game so much, as you can tell. So really loved when this game came out, and it's one of my most played DS games of all time.
Yeah, same here. Like, I played a ton of this game like right as it came out. I didn't do any actual clan battles, but I was constantly playing Wi-Fi all the time. I think this and Mario Kart DS were like my most played games online on the DS, like by a long shot. And yeah, like I beat the campaign multiple times, including getting the true ending. Got to do that Goria Phase 2, otherwise it's not a real playthrough. Got to do that. I think I made my way up to level 3. I think it was the elite rank. I really wanted to get that level 4, but I don't think I quite did that. The legendary rank, where you get like the gold multiplayer banner. Like, it looks, I loved seeing players with those because they look so cool. But I never didn't quite play enough to get to that rank. But yeah, got to elite. Had a lot of fun with hunters. Played with my friends when I could. I actually bought one of my friends who I still talk to today. I bought him a copy back in the day so that we could play together as well. But yeah. It wasn't.
Do you still have your copy?
Yes, I have all my original Metroid copies that I bought throughout the years. But yeah, I don't have the original box anymore though. I lost the box. But
I don't know if I have it either. Yeah,
but I still have the cartridge though in like my DS case, because I had a DS cases with like a bunch of my game cartridges in them. I have that, Mario Kart DS, Pinball, Animal Crossing, bunch of stuff.
So, looking back on this game, right? Like it's really the only so far the only Metroid game was really mostly focused on multiplayer. And it came out on the DS. It really hasn't been done since. What do you feel about like this game in like the grand scope of the entire franchise? Do you think it was successful at the time? Do you think it should be done again? Like, what are your thoughts like looking back on the game since it's been over a decade, maybe like a decade and a half since release, essentially?
Well, I'm not going to get too much in depth to that because without giving away too many spoilers, there might be a topic in the near future once Andy gets back.
Oh, fair, right, fair.
That and I definitely think Hunters is going to be relevant to that topic. In fact, not might be. It is going to be. I can at least say in what I'm going to say that it's going to be relevant, and I'm sure that you're going to be bringing it up as well. So we won't spoil that. We'll let all y'all listeners sit on that. But what I will say is, was Hunters a success? I would say yeah. It didn't break. It didn't like break the mold of Metroid sales, but I think for what it was, I think it performed admirably. I think it was somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million sales, which is fairly average for a Metroid game. And we've talked about this before on the Discord, but I think Hunters was ahead of its time. Unfortunately,
yes, it was.
Unfortunately, it was held back by the hardware it was on, which I do partially have to criticize the developers because I think it's on the developers to develop games for the hardware that they have in mind and being able to use those hardware limitations to shape the game and even innovate the game in ways possible, which I think Metroid 2 does a little bit better. But overall, like Hunters has so many really interesting concepts. It's an idea that no other game has really tried, and a lot of those trends that you see in Hunters are like mainstream trends now. Like it was basically, it was one of the first hero shooters that I can really remember. Like, I'm sure someone in the comments will type out, like, no, you idiot, it was actually blah, blah, blah in, like, 1997 or something. But you had all these different characters with these unique abilities, and that wasn't really a trend in FPS multiplayer at the time. And now, like, you see that everywhere with, like, a lot of the CODs. You have Overwatch, obviously. You have Battleborn for the 2 days that it was on the market. But yeah.
Yep. No, definitely. I 100% agree it was ahead of its time. We'll definitely get into that more in the coming weeks, and I definitely think it'll be tried again. So I loved that game. And then it got followed up, so to speak, a year later, August 2007, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. So at the time, the end of the Metroid Prime trilogy, the culmination since 2000, it had been 5 years since the first game had come out, a long journey, spin-offs, a sequel, so much had happened since then, and then you finally get to Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. I remember the E3 hype, multiple E3 hype, multiple E3s worth of hype for this game. I remember following it on Insider, I remember following it on G4, watching their coverage. I was so excited for this game, and even though I wasn't very excited, I mean, honestly, looking back, I remember originally I thought the whole like aiming with the Wii remote, like I thought it was like weird and different because I was used to like playing on a regular controller, but at the same time I almost like didn't care. I know like even though I wasn't like as hype about like the Wii controls, I still thought it was awesome because it was Metroid, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to point and click and shoot space pirates and pull with my grapple with the nunchuck and whatnot. It was new. I mean, the Wii was such a, like, I think that it played into the fact that the Wii was just such a phenomenon at the time, right? That even though, like, I guess looking back, motion controls aren't my favorite, it was just so crazy to, like, see a Metroid, not only just a new Metroid Prime game again, but, like, playing it with the Wii controls and having, aiming and shooting and actually feeling, I guess, kind of like you're playing as Samus in that way. So I remember that being like a big deal as a kid to me. I was so excited for the follow-up of this game. The original trailer, seeing the new ship, I thought looked so cool. What do you remember most about like the original like release and hype for this game?
Oh my god, dude! I was all on board. The motion controller thing when I was young. Obviously nowadays, and seeing how it's all panned out, obviously I have a very different opinion on motion controls at large. I still think for the most part, Corruption does it absolutely phenomenally, and it's still my preferred method of playing through the entire Metroid Prime trilogy. It's one of those few games where I feel like the motion aiming is fairly accurate and it's fun. It's obviously it's not quite what I envisioned as a kid, where I was imagining like actually like aiming my arm as the arm cannon and whatnot. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's not really that. It's much more like wrist movements than anything. You're not really moving your shoulders that much. But even still, like as a kid, like I fully bought into like all that hype. And it was up, I would say, up until Metroid Dread, it was probably the most hyped I'd ever been for a game like in my entire life, because at this point I was playing like all the Metroid games like as they were coming out. Super Metroid was actually
Yep.
released on the Wii Shop channel. That's a throwback, but that was released on the Wii Shop channel a couple weeks before Prime 3 came out, so I immediately bought that, and I beat that literally days before Prime 3 came out. So my body was ready for this game. Like I was super hyped. There was this game, one of the few games that I think Nintendo really did a pretty decent job marketing, actually. Like obviously we weren't getting any Prime 1 movie theater trailers, but like constantly I was seeing ads for it on online on IGN and whatnot. There was the Metroid
Yep.
Prime 3 channel that Nintendo released
Yes.
that had like
wow, throwback.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my god.
and like every
Continue,
single
but
and
wow,
every
great.
single week Nintendo would put like a new trailer depicting like one of the aspects of the game, like the Phazon enhancement devices, the GFS Valhalla. There was a Dark Samus trailer, and I remember watching that Dark Samus
Oh.
trailer, just how creepy and just unsettling it looked, and I was I was super excited for this game at the time.
Dude, you're taking me back. I completely forgot about that channel. I would check that all the time. I remember sometimes just letting it sit there and listening to the music. Wow, dude, that is bringing me back. That is just so nostalgic. That is some of the like pure Metroid love I have, is like getting hyped for this game. And like yeah, the channel and watching like all I mean, there were like the we would like the play commercial. Even Metroid Prime got one of those. Yeah, wow, the nostalgia for this game I had was real, and even when it came out, I enjoyed it a lot because it was a little more story based and it felt like more cinematic and action heavy, and I really liked that. I liked all the characters they introduced. I liked the story of the game, and it definitely felt like a solid closing chapter of the series. Like it didn't feel like it had any kind of loose ends really. It felt like what a Metroid Prime conclusion, like final game should be, I guess. It felt great. Yeah, like sometimes the motion controls wouldn't cooperate. I definitely have like a lot of images of like how if you lose like I guess like if the Wii remote like to the console, like the reticle would like the crosshair would blink,
Yeah,
and kinda not respond.
that little yellow symbol.
Exactly, like that is what I think of sometimes. I think of Metroid Prime 3 playing it in motion controls. But I still have so much.
Maybe I
love for
just
this
have
game.
a good setup, but I never really had that problem when I was playing.
I had that. See, that was the thing, is maybe that was that affected people's experience overall with many Wii games. I remember having that issue with Metroid Prime 3 and some other games, and I would struggle through it. But I remember, I don't know, maybe it was just my setup or proximity to other things, and I just was a dumb kid and didn't know better, or didn't have any choice of how my house was situated at the time. But yeah, I definitely remember that, and still made the most of it and played the hell out of this game. Though I do remember I remember there's one point in the game we have to collect those like energy cores. And there's a bunch of those, like a dozen of those, something like that. Like those.
Oh,
like,
you mean
big,
the phasoids, where you have to go into hyper mode and take those out for like the credits?
I think so. I think I'm misremembering. I believe that is in Prime 3. You had to collect a bunch of these like cores that you had to then use the motion controls to lock into like
the
a
energy
wall
cells,
or something
the
like
energy
that.
cells.
Yeah, the energy cells. Yes, I remember that was the first time I got frustrated with the game because I missed one or two. I was like, oh my god, I have no idea which ones they were, like where I got these. And I had to go and backtrack, but I got through it. But still, I really loved this game. The hyper mode was cool. I thought the suits were awesome, and it really felt like an awesome culmination of like this was, I would say, like the middle portion of like the Metroid golden era we talked about, like the golden age, like where the spin-offs are coming out and Echo's coming out. Like that was definitely like the peak of it. But this to me was like when I had both Hunters and then Corruption come out, like that was the peak for me. Because there was so much Metroid at that point. You had 3 Metroid Prime games, plus Hunters, plus Pinball, plus Fusion, plus Zero Mission. Like there was so much Metroid to play that I looked at it as like a full package. Like there was any experience I wanted really with a Metro, in a Metroid setting. I had it.
Yeah, a quality Metroid
That to me
buffet.
was exactly. It was a smorgasbord of Metroid, and that to me is like Golden Age Metroid right there. Is you had any kind of Metroid experience you wanted to. You had pinball. Come on, like that was crazy to me. So
The real goat. There you go.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, we need Metroid Prime Pinball too. Where's that? But
I'll even
to me
take
is
I'll
where
even
it kinda
take an
goes
HD
to.
remake with the inevitable Metroid Prime trilogy port, which you will do, Nintendo. You are
Absolutely.
going to do that, right? Right?
I would hope so. Well, baby steps. Let's get to Dread and Prime 4 first, and then we can go off into our Platinum era.
But yeah, Prime 3
Um,
it's my
yeah,
least favorite of the trilogy, but despite that, it's still a solid game. I still really love it, I think a testament to that game is, cuz graphically at that time we were getting, we were just experiencing, the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox and like, those at the time some of those graphics don't really look good today anymore, but like back then, like I remember some of those PS3 and 360 games looked incredible. For me in particular, like Gears of War was like the first game that made my jaw drop. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it looks like real life." And the Wii didn't really have those games up until I think Prime 3 and Super Mario Galaxy. Those were the first games
agreed.
where I feel like Nintendo really found these art styles that work really well with the Wii hardware and just really got the best out of those. Like Prime 3 even to this day, like I just mentioned Gears of War. Like while that game had a bigger impact on me at the time, nowadays, like you go back and play that first Gears game, like it looks ugly. Like you have to play Gears Ultimate Edition if you want to play that first game and have it look really really nice. Metroid Prime 3,
Right.
like, even at 480p, like that game still looks incredible, let alone if you play it on Dolphin at 1080p. Like
Oh, I can't wait, dude. Honestly, I think Corruption might even have a case for best Metroid Prime, though I think it might be Echoes. I don't even know. That's one thing I love about the three Metroid Prime games, that they're all like A's. And it's like, oh, is this an A plus? Is it an A? Like who knows?
I would
Um,
personally give Corruption a B personally, but
okay.
Prime and Prime 2 I would both give A pluses. Maybe Prime 2 give an A, but Prime 3 I would
That's
give
what I
Prime 3 I'd give a B or maybe a B plus.
so I've always felt it would be like A plus for Metroid Prime, A for Echoes, A minus for Corruption. That's or like,
Okay.
high 90s and then mid 90s and then like low 90s for Corruption. That's how I've always looked at it. But honestly, I cannot wait to go back, and I'm gonna stream it too. So check that out. I'm definitely gonna try out Echoes and Corruption on mouse and keyboard, because I cannot wait. Gonna be awesome. But yeah, so that is really like the golden age, right? And that was so much. I mean, we're almost from an hour and 20 minutes almost.
This
At
might
least,
be the
obviously.
longest podcast we've recorded yet.
It's definitely up there, but we spent a lot of this chunk talking about just such a long and good time being a Metroid fan. Like this was pure Metroid fan goodness. Like this is the best time as far as I'm concerned to be a Metroid fan. Before we close this out, we wanted to talk about something quickly because had a little bit of a disagreement. Besides the fact that we can agree that this was definitely the golden age of Metroid, we agree when it started, and we agree that it was awesome time to be a Metroid fan, and we hope you all enjoyed reminiscing about those games with us. But we had a bit of a disagreement before we started, and Doominal was saying that he thinks the end of the golden age, correct me if I'm wrong, that's how you phrase it, would be Other M. The end of that, where as far as I'm concerned, the end of the golden age was the last good release in that time, which was Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. So that's what I would say. The golden age starts and ends 2002 to 2007. You're saying you think Other M is part of that, which I cannot agree. So please explain yourself.
So first off, I am also in the camp of you and Andy, where I do not think Other M is a good game. I still enjoy it, but not for the reason that Sakamoto probably wants me to enjoy it, because I think it's a really silly and goofy game, and while the gameplay is clunky, but it's still playable in my opinion, with the exception of a couple of the pixel hunt sequences, especially the one in Ridley where it's pitch dark. That one's an absolute pain in the ass. I hate that one. But, that aside, I think the gameplay, it's okay. It's not terrible, it's not amazing, but it's fine. It's fine. And the story, I think it's really goofy. There's some people out there that will live and die by that story. More power to you if you're that. I personally, I can't relate to that, but I think the story is just really entertaining. Is this really weird, goofy kind of like it's like watching Batman and Robin or watching The Room. Like it's so bad that it's funny. Like I can't not be entertained.
I agree with that. It is so bad that it's funny.
and it's like you kind of, and it's like, pretend for a moment that, you know pretend for a moment, like, take out all the context of the rest of the Metroid series, take out the history of this series and everything, just focusing on this game in a bubble. Like, it's a very silly and funny game, and I enjoy it for what it is. And that being said, I do consider it specifically just because of when it released. Even if, the game might be divisive, some people love Other M, some people are indifferent, some people despise Other M. At the end of the day,
as they should.
At the end, huh?
I said as they should.
And yeah, at the end of the day, like, I guess it all depends on how you define Golden Age. For me, I don't think a game has to be critically praised for it to be a part of the Golden Age. I simply consider the Golden Age as the amount of Metroid titles that were released and the overall outlook that the Metroid series as a whole had on the people that played that series, not necessarily the individual games, but more as the collective. And I consider Other M a part of that collective, despite its opinions, and kind of its divisiveness that it's had within the Metroid community since then. But, obviously you feel different, and I see your perspective too, because, I mean, Other M arguably did. It cut the community in half, and it arguably is what started, our second Metroid drought. So, I can see your perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think, obviously, I respect your opinion, but definitely disagree. But I think on two accounts, because number one, I definitely think it has to do with the quality of games. Because if you release 5 or 6 Metroid games and they're all bad, you can't call it a Golden Age just because you had 5 or 6 Metroid games. If they're all bad, then then it doesn't matter. But the fact that the Golden Age was not only because we got a bunch of Metroid games, but they were all really good. That's what makes it a Golden Age, and not just it's a great time to be a Metroid fan. That made it the best time to be a Metroid fan. On the second point, in terms of proximity to release, Other M came out 3 years after Prime 3, which I think is more than enough time to consider it not part of the same era. And I wouldn't even really consider Trilogy as a stopgap to kind of link the two times together, because it's just a collection of the ports. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Other M took, it was 3 years. We hadn't, like, the Metroid, there was a new Metroid game every year of the Golden Age except 2003. There was a new Metroid game in 2002, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. Then you had 2008, 2009, only until 2010 to get a new one, and it wasn't good. So as far as I'm concerned, once Metroid Prime 3 came out and you had that release window, that's when it ended, and then you transitioned into the Dark Ages, which, unfortunately, Trilogy, I wouldn't, was part of that transitory era, or like that kind of transition era in between, and then you had the Dark Ages, which began with Other M and went until, I would say, until just before Samus Returns, came out. So that's how I look at it. I see what you're saying, though. But I definitely disagree.
Yeah, I think that last point you made in particular about, that gap between Other M and Corruption, because, like, at the time, it didn't feel like that long of a gap, but, like, now that you mention it, like, with the frequency of Metroid titles that were coming out, that was, at least at the time, that was a rather long gap between Metroid titles that we hadn't really seen for like a decade at that point. So I do see that. I do think you make a good point there.
That's interesting you say that, though, because earlier you were saying how you definitely remember the wait from First Hunt demo to Metroid Prime Hunters,
right?
which was shorter.
Exactly.
But for me, I 100% remember the wait from Prime 3 to Other M.
Interesting.
Because, first off, because I didn't know how bad Other M was I was excited for it. But, like,
Same.
It was I was so used to having so many consistent Metroid releases that all of a sudden, for the 3-year wait, that was excruciating for me. Well, I definitely remember that.
So the thing with Corruption in Other M is, so first off, I was much younger.
One's good, one's bad. Sorry, keep going.
But yeah, so I was much younger when I think I was still in elementary school or like middle school, like when Hunters came out. Whereas when Other M came out, I was already like well into high school at this point. I think it came out my junior year or something like that. And also, Other M wasn't announced until 2009. So the wait for Other M was really only like a year since that initial E3 announcement. And while it was a bit and that was about the same length as it was for Corruption. Technically, it was about 2 years for Corruption, but Corruption only had like that small CG trailer, like when the Wii was still called the Revolution. It didn't get that full E3 blowout until
awesome trailer though.
Yes.
That was enough for me. I remember that.
where we first saw the amazing gunship like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and it was like flying over like all the phase tendrils. Oh, such a love it, love it. Yes, but I definitely see what you're saying. I would still separate it though, but let us know out there if you're listening what you think on our thoughts. You definitely jump into the Discord. I do have one
question, and this isn't like a gotcha or anything. I'm genuinely curious to hear his perspective on this. Let's say in an alternate timeline, if Corruption and Other M switched release dates, would you still consider Corruption to be the end of the Golden Age, or would you consider Hunters to be the end of the Golden Age, since that would be the last game for Other M?
Yeah, I would consider Hunters to be the last one.
Okay, all right.
And then it would start another era, which would likely be a very mixed one, because it would have a really good game and a really bad one, and that would be just a different timeline. But yeah, I would consider it ending at Hunters then, and not including Other M and then Corruption.
All right, cool, interesting.
That's how I feel about the structure of eras and categorizing history. But wow, it's been an hour and a half we've been talking about this stuff. A lot of good stuff to talk about. But we got to go and move on to some more stuff, because we have a lot more Metroid to talk about. It'll be myself and Doominal in the coming weeks as we talk about Metroid music. We're talking about Metroid Dread. We're talking about a bunch of stuff, and it's going to be awesome. So we'll definitely let you know what's in the works as we get closer and closer to it. But I want to also thank you, Doominal, for joining me once again. This is the first time I've actually hosted the show myself, so I hope I did a all right job. But thank you so much for helping me out here and helping us out, as you know, both myself and Andy have been kind of in flux going through this hectic year. So thanks for joining in, man.
It's playoff season, and someone's got to be on the bench to pull off, when someone breaks their ankle or something, and I'm more than happy to be that guy. Always love doing these, and I think you did a great job hosting. I mean, you definitely, considering the length of this episode, I think you definitely didn't run out of topics and ideas to cover. So
well, that was one thing. Maybe I should have reined it in, but maybe not. We had a lot to talk about, and it was a lot of fun going back through all that. I hope you all enjoyed this extra long episode. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Omega Metroid podcast. And thanks for joining us for some Metroid. We hope to get some more Metroid to you real soon. Have a good one.